September 7, 1945. Berlin. The war is over, but something else is beginning. Along the Charlottenburger Chaussee, a long boulevard cutting through the shattered Tiergarten, Allied troops stand shoulder to shoulder. The ruins of the Reichstag loom in the background. At the center of it all, Marshal Georgy Zhukov takes the salute. Notably absent, Eisenhower. Montgomery. Present, however, is General George Patton, watching closely. Then, the ground begins to tremble. They arrive in formation. Low, angular, almost predatory in shape. 52 Soviet heavy tanks roll past the reviewing stand, their armor sloped like a blade, their silhouettes unlike anything the West has ever fielded. These are IS-3s. And in that moment, the victory parade becomes something else entirely, a warning. Western officers exchange glances. No one says it out loud, but the conclusion is unavoidable. They have nothing that can stop this. No American tank. No British gun. Nothing in their arsenals comes close. The Cold War hasn't been declared yet, but right here, on this scarred Berlin Avenue, it has already begun. 12 years later, in a vicar's workshop in northern England, that moment still echoes. British engineers are staring at the same problem, and pushing it to an extreme conclusion. Their answer? A Centurion hull stretched to its limits. A turret so thin it barely qualifies as armor. And a gun so enormous that even its creators struggle to justify it. It looks absurd. But it exists for one reason only: to kill anything the Soviets can build. By 1950, this is no longer theoretical. The British War Office sets a brutal requirement: any future anti-tank weapon must defeat the equivalent of 152 mm of armor, sharply angled, at over a mile's distance. Every available gun is tested against that standard. The 20-pounder? Insufficient. The American 90 mm? Not even close. Even the upcoming 120 mm guns struggle against the geometry of Soviet armor, designed specifically to deflect incoming fire. And meanwhile, Soviet tanks keep getting heavier. Stronger. The IS-4. Then the IS-7, massive, experimental, nearly unstoppable. And the T-10, entering service with armor that makes earlier designs look almost vulnerable. From London's perspective, the trend is clear. Whatever comes next will be worse. So Britain decides to leap ahead. Not incrementally, but radically. The result is the Ordnance L4, a 183 mm gun. A weapon so large it borders on the unreasonable. Its barrel stretches nearly 15 feet. The gun alone weighs almost 4 tons. And the ammunition is unlike anything seen before. Each round weighs over 70 kilograms. 2 men are required to load it. But it's not just size that makes it extraordinary, it's how it kills. Instead of punching through armor, the shell uses a different principle entirely. On impact, it spreads, flattening against the surface like soft metal under pressure. A fraction of a second later, it detonates. The shockwave travels through the armor itself. And inside, the metal fails. Fragments tear loose from the interior face, blasting through the crew compartment with lethal force. The armor remains intact on the outside. But inside, the tank is destroyed. No penetration required. No angle matters. Distance doesn't reduce its effect. If it hits, it kills. To carry this weapon, the British build the FV4005. At first, it's little more than a test platform, a Centurion chassis with an exposed gun mount. But the final version, Stage 2, encloses the weapon in a thin steel turret. Just enough to stop shrapnel. Nothing more. Because protection isn't the priority. Firepower is. When the gun fires, it unleashes a force greater than the weight of the tank itself. So they anchor it to the ground. A massive spade is lowered into the earth before each shot, pinning the vehicle in place. Without it, the physics become unpredictable. In 1955, the firing trials begin. The results are violent. The tank lurches upward with each shot. Components bend. Internal systems strain under the stress. Fire it enough times, and the machine quite literally begins to shake itself apart. But the gun? The gun works exactly as intended. In one test, a single round strikes a Centurion target. The turret is blown clean off. In another, heavily armored test fixtures are split open by repeated impacts. One shot. One kill. Exactly as designed. And yet, just as the project proves itself, it dies. 1957. Cancelled. Not because it failed, but because the world changed. Missiles have arrived. Guided weapons, lighter, cheaper, more precise. A small vehicle can now do what once required a 50-ton machine. At the same time, the feared wave of Soviet heavy tanks never fully materializes. Strategy shifts. Priorities change. And back in Britain, a more practical solution is already emerging, a 120mm gun, still using the same destructive principles, but mounted on tanks that can actually fight, move, and survive. The era of super heavy guns is over. But the FV4005 doesn't disappear entirely. Decades later, one surviving turret is recovered, restored, and mounted once again onto a Centurion hull. Today, it sits at Bovington. Silent. Imposing. Almost surreal in its proportions. A relic of a moment when engineers were asked an impossible question. And answered it without compromise. Because that's what the FV4005 was. Not elegant. Not efficient. Not practical. But decisive. It was built for a single purpose. To ensure that if the next war began the way the last one ended, with tanks rolling through Europe, Britain would have an answer. One shot. One kill. No matter what stood in front of it.